We put that on the front page. Should the Falcons get in the Super Bowl by some miracle, that might make the front page as well. And then the stadium stuff did because, you know what I mean, watchdog, government spending, taxes, all that stuff. So sometimes college presidents who call me, who shall remain nameless, about our coverage or their unhappiness or happiness with it, I will remind them that they sort of live at the crossroads of a lot of key topics for our readers because universities, particularly public universities, are supported by taxes. Government spends on it. It's obviously an education item. They're often caught up in politics. So that schools in particular kind of we can cover them a lot for that reason. So questions about that? Yes.
So this is what people, looking at now online, feel like websites not finishing. Like, a lot of like websites like do that not just like anything not. Do you guys like seeing the change from there because of the readers?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a couple things, and there's a big debate in the news all the time. One thing that's not on the list, obviously, that you don't want to forget is news. I mean, the best thing of all is big news. The brave news in Cobb County. You could talk about where that fits in, but in the end, it fits into the news. One of the things we find out is that, and we learned this, something we learned from our radio colleagues, is if you keep your loyalists happy. So when they talk about it, sometimes they'll talk about like a country music station. If they play the music that makes the hardcore country music listener happy, there's a halo effect. But if they're chasing people who they would like to listen to country music, those core people won't be happy and you'll lose them. So newspapers did a lot of, let's try to make light readers, female readers, young readers, and what happened was our core readers kept getting angry with us, and we think the solutions for other readers are really close. That makes sense.
I was just gonna ask about the weather, like the ice storm and stuff like that, but I guess for the crossroads and transportation.
Well, I tell you, that's a great question. That's a great question. But you're right. I mean, you're absolutely right. It was an interesting thing for us because we don't like weather in newspapers. We for a long time, and there's a reason for that, especially compared to TV. Weather never breaks right for us because you write something about the weather and the next morning it's different. You just kind of look out a day. But television, in their research, so what the top reason to watch TV news is? Weather. You know what the second reason is? Weather. First is severe weather, actually, and then second, I think, is forecasting. Like the forecast. I mean, ask yourself. How many times have you put in TV and just want to know what the next 5 days is? And Glenn Burns. The other thing TV is really great at, especially WSB, which is our, in our company. The reason they emphasize that, okay, and I'll kind of come back to our work on weather. The reason television emphasizes that is because in every town, the television station with the best reputation for covering weather, severe weather, forecasting, tornadoes, snow, whatever the weather situation, they will be the top rated station because it's so important. And then further, Glenn, you guys probably know Glenn Burns is the chief meteorologist at WSB. I mean, people believe, and it's true, that he can save their life, right? Because if weather gets bad, who are you going to put on? Who do you think is going to let you know about the tornado first? They have the better technology. They have the better, you know what I mean? And that's part of the position they take in the market. WSB is really good at it. And Glenn Burns is, I've met him and known him a little bit. Those guys, they work their asses off with that. They really do a great job. So we have generally not done too much with weather for all those reasons. It's tough to compete. What happened with this storm was we were just covering it as news, and we were monitoring social media and our website, all the stuff that was going on. The government accountability thing became huge, especially that first one. People were, they were pissed about being stuck in their cars and all that stuff. And so if you watch what we did, we immediately shifted to that accountability thing. And then other media followed, you know what I mean? Because television was really in the midst of reporting all of the stuff that was going on and traffic and news, weather, traffic on the radio, that kind of thing. And so it became a great accountability story for us, and kind of that watchdog giving the real story. That is important to us because not only are we really good at it, and people want us to do it, they generally don't. The average person does not believe that anyone else will do it. They believe the newspaper has the resources and what's this called, gumption to do that. And of course, I believe that's true. For example, we have a reporter who covers the governor. That's his whole job, all day. The governor loves him. He loves that. He loves someone following him around all day. You have someone who covers the mayor too. And so that's really important to us that we kind of lay claim to that position. And that's what I think is changing. We can't be known necessarily for other things. We have to be known for a certain group of folk. Does that make sense? All right, we'll keep going. I got endless slides, I'm kidding. So the investigative journalism has been huge for us. We devote an enormous amount of resources to really digging into that stuff, and it pays off, but it's very high investment kind of work. In other words, you really have to let people work on it, and you might let people work weeks to develop a story that we would do. And the cheating scandal in the public school system, of course, was kind of a signature piece for us. And in the end, that was a guy on our staff who's an expert in computer analysis who analyzed the scores and showed there was just no way. And then it was 2 years of people criticizing us and telling us we were wrong. And then it was 34 people indicted. So it was that work started before I came, so I kind of came in the middle of it. And then we did a nationwide story. I don't know if any of you remember that. We did a story that showed thousands of schools across the country were probably cheating. Because we analyzed the tests of every school district in the country. And we showed that in certain states it was pretty obvious that they had patterns just like Atlanta. So then we were attacked by everyone in the country about it. And slowly those scandals have started to unfold as well. And it was interesting for me because, again, I came in the middle of that and got to know the reporters. And so, I get a little nervous about information. And in fact, had been fairly conservative in calling out schools, that there were probably even more cheating, but they had such a high standard. So, good story for us, one we've become known for. We're working now on how to cover these trials and stuff. And yes. Yeah, we do that. Yeah. One of the weird things, and we'll talk about this in a few slides, I hope. Newspapers are less good at taking credit than they should be. That's something we've actually been working on, and again, something we've learned from our television colleagues. Television is much better at communicating what they're doing for their viewers. And newspaper people are like, well, we'll let the story speak for itself. And in this age, I think 30 years ago, maybe you could get away with that, but now you really have to take credit for stuff. And we've actually done some research and tried to figure out what's the right way to do it. And what we think and what we're learning is just tell people what you're doing. Just in the paper and your advertising, tell them, here's what we did. So glad you got your taxes and everything. That's big. One of the other things too is people want to see their community reflected in the paper. We have a little bit of that perception of good news, bad news kind of stuff, which we can talk about. We actually don't think about good news versus bad news. We think about significant news. Most significant news, I think, would be interpreted as sort of bad news for people. But I think I could actually prove, and I always say this, that we probably run more of what you, in the total paper, more of what you consider good news than bad news. It's just that we remember bad news because we're human beings. On your drive home tonight, if you get home safely and everything's fine, you're not calling up anybody to tell them. But if you get in a wreck, right, that's what you're doing. So, but this is really important. People want to see and feel like the paper's paying attention to where they live. And so these pages have been very successful, even though it's fairly straightforward stuff. Okay, so we got this problem. This is a big thing for newspapers. And when I came here, this was especially difficult for us. So we do a lot of research on this, and we ask people, on like a scale of 1 to 10, where they put themselves, where they put the AJC, where their ideal newspaper would be, all that stuff. So this is probably what I've spent the most time on and effort since I've been here, because we were sort of way over this way, a while ago, which wasn't good. We were losing readers because of it. So here's where we are now, and I'm sure you have some questions about this, and I have some opinions about it too. Readers are okay with the paper that's in this market, slightly more liberal than they are. They're cool with that. They just don't want it to be way more liberal than they are. And again, this is self-identified, so it isn't. I came here from Ohio, and I'll just tell you, a conservative in Ohio is very different than a conservative in Georgia, and I'll leave it at that. And so this is, one of the things, and it has a lot to do with our opinion pages, and we've made a lot of changes there, our editorial pages. It has a lot to do with history. It has a lot to do with things like partisan broadcast and radio, shows, because face it, there's an entire industry out there who has to position mainstream media as liberal to even have a purpose. You know what I mean? So that's going to be ongoing. I get it, depending on the room, this is a pretty lively discussion or not. But I don't know. You probably have some questions. I mean, come on, don't just let me get away with this here. Go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, I can see where you put in where you're seeing sales and conservative. I would say, my guess is if you're in a metro area, it's just a remote, and some of that lending can be in areas that are old enough to live in the background. Personal experience and my parents, lived in that area as well, and they tried to be able to see.
Thank you. Thank him for me.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just